Hey there. You're listening to True Story No Cap. Real stories, no exaggeration, no lies. Just the raw, unfiltered moments life throws our way. Relax, lean back, and let's get started. A dusty, narrow street led Michael into the very heart of the small provincial town with the unusual name of Riverton. The journey there had been long, first a plane to the regional center, then several hours of rattling on a commuter train. But Michael didn't feel tired or annoyed by the trip. He had loved traveling since childhood, and every business trip was perceived by him as a new, exciting adventure. Usually his business trips were to noisy metropolises, as the company where he worked as chief economist was a large chain selling household appliances. Branches multiplied across the country, and his task was to resolve important issues related to their opening. And so he came to Riverton to prepare the ground for the appearance of another store of their thriving company. Everything went as smoothly as possible. Papers signed, problem settled, task completed. Tomorrow morning he faced the return journey, a commuter train to the regional center, and then a plane home to his native Granville. The head office of their large company was located precisely there, in Michael's city, which was a very convenient and well-thought-out solution. The evening was free, and Michael decided to walk around Riverton, look around, feel its rhythm. He liked the town for its quietness and tranquility. Life here seemed to flow measuredly and unhurriedly. Surely, he thought, everyone here knows each other, and the spirit of good neighborliness is still alive, unlike in bustling metropolises. Michael imagined turning into one of the yards and seeing a picture from the past. Old people on benches, children playing in a sandbox, men leaning over a car. All this reminded him of his own childhood. Every summer his mother sent him for a couple of weeks to his grandparents, his father's parents, who lived in a large village. How he looked forward to those short but such happy days. His parents divorced when he was very young, and Michael didn't remember the details, but his mother often recalled that period with resentment. His father, according to her, left them for a new woman with whom he moved to Eastport. "Her parents are more important to her, and he abandoned us," she would exclaim, not sparing harsh words for her ex-husband. She often called him brainless, blinded by a pretty face and long legs. Michael found it unpleasant to hear such things, but he couldn't object. His father truly didn't participate in his life. In Eastport, he had other children, Michael's half-brother and sister. Apparently, his new family was enough for him, and he wasn't drawn to his son from his first marriage. Perhaps the new wife was against their communication, who knows? His father paid alimony regularly, but he never called, never wished him a happy birthday. His grandmother and grandfather lived relatively close, only 100 kilometers from Granville, and every summer they eagerly awaited their grandson. His mother, although wary of them, fearing they would turn her son against her, still let him go. These 1 or 2 weeks a year were a real holiday for Michael. He basked in their love and care, enjoyed delicious food, went fishing with his grandfather, slept in a tent, swam in the river with the local kids. He knew his grandmother and grandfather would be happy if he stayed with them all summer, and he himself really wanted to, but he had to be content with little, happy to have at least these short visits. Notably, his grandmother and grandfather never spoke ill of his mother. On the contrary, they instilled in the boy that it was hard for his mother alone and he should help her. But his mother wasn't shy about expressing herself when talking about her former in-laws. "They couldn't even raise their own child properly," she would exclaim. "They never left the village their whole lives, and they don't even speak properly." Her words hurt Michael as he loved his village relatives. Sometimes his grandmother and grandfather told him about the childhood of their son, Michael's father. These were cheerful stories, full of mischief and adventures, like the Just William stories. Michael laughed heartily, listening to his father's antics, and sincerely didn't understand. How could such a cheerful, brave guy, good at making friends, abandon him, his own son? Didn't he think about him at all? Wasn't he interested in what he had become? Later, Michael learned that his father had still tried to keep in touch. He called, sent postcards and toys, but his mother, blinded by resentment and a desire for revenge, didn't give him a single chance. She told him about it herself when Michael had grown up. It happened on the day he learned of his father's death. The man, still not old at all, was taken by a heart attack. Michael barely knew this person, but the news of his death pressed down on him like a concrete slab. He had always assumed that someday they would meet, talk, sort everything out. And now that opportunity was gone, forever. It was over. Then, on the day of his father's death, his mother spoke well of him for the first time. It turned out that when Michael was a baby, it was his young father who bathed him, got up at night, and ran to the milk kitchen. But she immediately returned to her grievances, telling about his attempts to contact his son. "Yes, he wanted to communicate with you," his mother admitted through tears, "but I was so hurt. And I thought nothing would come of it anyway. He's so far away, we're here. Why break your heart? It's better not to know such a father at all." Michael forgave and understood his mother. He always felt sorry for her. She raised him alone, dedicating herself entirely to him, never marrying a second time. Thanks to her efforts, Michael grew into a successful and prosperous man. From an early age, his mother instilled in him that he must get a higher education. She herself worked as a seamstress her whole life, often taking orders at home. Michael liked listening to the whirring of the sewing machine and watching a beautiful skirt or sundress being born from a simple piece of fabric. His mother seemed like a magician to him, and her work brought a good income to their small family. In childhood, Michael lacked nothing. He had fashionable clothes, beautiful toys, a bicycle, interesting books, and ice cream every day if he wanted. They lived in a good apartment with comfortable furniture and appliances. They even had decorative figurines. Once a year, mother and son always went to the sea. Michael felt like a perfectly happy child. "Study hard, son," his mother instructed. "Get an education, become someone important, then we'll really live." Michael thought they were doing quite well as it was, but he listened to his mother's words. He enjoyed studying, and it came easily to him. He was almost a straight A student without much effort. Student life completely captivated him. At university, he found interesting friends, participated in parties, trips to nature, and joint preparation for exams. All this resembled a bright carousel, and Michael felt happy, in his element. His mother was a little scared by his student parties. She often warned her son against thoughtless actions. "Be careful, son," she repeated. "Everything is good for you now. A wonderful future awaits, but it's very easy to lose everything." This was followed by lectures on the dangers of alcohol, the risk of falling into bad company or being beaten, and the risks of getting too carried away and failing exams. And his mother was also afraid of greedy girls who, in her opinion, only dreamed of getting pregnant by a promising guy to ruin his life. Michael was amused by these maternal fears. He perfectly understood and controlled himself, trying to convince his mother that he had a head on his shoulders, but she couldn't accept that her son had grown up. She still felt she had to protect him, lay a straw mattress for him, be by his side. Remembering his student years, Michael smiled. His mother was still the same, always worrying about him, her only son, trying to arrange his life. Now she had a new fixation. Her son, a grown, established man, already approaching 40, was still unmarried. This, in her opinion, was completely out of order. His mother stubbornly tried to set him up with the daughters of her friends and acquaintances, good girls from decent families. This was both funny and awkward for Michael. He wasn't angry with his mother, treating her concern condescendingly, understanding that she simply wished him the best, in her understanding. Michael himself was doing quite well as a bachelor. Is that bad? You're only responsible for yourself. You do what you want. You don't report to anyone, he thought, but you couldn't explain that to his mother. Of course, Michael had brief romances. Some girls tried to ring him, but he firmly cut off such attempts and immediately broke off relationships. He didn't need a family. Why? What if he wouldn't be a good husband and father? He saw how many unhappy couples there were, how people constantly argued, divided things, how many divorces there were. Adults couldn't figure things out, and children suffered. No, he didn't want that for himself, and it wasn't simple at all. Many years ago, Michael was sure he had met the love of his life. These were sincere and strong feelings. The world seemed transformed, brighter and warmer. And then came disappointment and almost physical pain. He didn't want to live, and he only pulled through then thanks to his mother, who found him a good psychotherapist. It was scary to think what might have happened without that specialist. No, Michael didn't want such shocks again, so he consciously chose a life where work held the main place. True, his mother couldn't come to terms with this. She wanted to see her son with a wife and cute little ones. But never mind, she would get over it somehow. Michael himself didn't understand why all these thoughts and memories flooded over him now. It all started when provincial Riverton reminded him a little of his grandparents in the village, his father's parents. They had been gone for a long time, passing away in the same year, almost one after the other. His mother was outraged then that Michael's father hadn't even come to say goodbye to his parents, leaving all the hassle to his brother. Only later did Michael learn that his father had serious financial problems, and it was impossible to get from Eastport so quickly. But then his mother painted a vivid picture for her son of his parents' terrible deed, not holding back in her expressions. Michael sighed. Over the years, he understood more clearly that his mother, his beloved, loving mother, who had done everything for him, had pressured him, shaped his opinion, molded him to her liking. Because of this, in childhood and youth, he often felt lost. But what was the point of talking about it now? He didn't hold a grudge against his mother. On the contrary, he felt gratitude and pitied her. Not every woman is capable of laying her life on the altar of her child's future. His mother had to work hard, solve endless problems. As an adult, Michael called her every day, visited often, and gave her gifts for no reason. He understood how important his grown son's attention and conscious gratitude were to her. His feet carried Michael to the station square. In small towns, all roads lead to the station, which wasn't surprising. Well, he could have dinner here. Surely there would be a cozy cafe or even a canteen. For some reason, he suddenly wanted homemade food, the kind you could only find in canteens. Just then, as if on cue, a sign caught his eye. Canteen. Michael walked towards it with quick steps. He needed to cross the square with a fountain. It was by this fountain that a shaky, dry, and cracked voice stopped him. "Young man, it's awkward to ask, but there's no other way. Please help if you can." Michael turned around and saw a hunched, wrinkled old woman in an old faded dress, with a colorful headscarf and dusty, worn-out sneakers. But her eyes, blue eyes, clearly not so old, looked timid and guilty. Perhaps she was a beggar, the same age as his mother, just life had aged her so much. Of course. Michael nodded and reached into his pockets. Usually he paid with a card, but this time he had a few 1,000-ruble bills. Without hesitation, he held them out to the woman because, well, it was clear she was in great need. There was so much hope in her gaze. She didn't look like the brazen professional beggars. "Is this all for me?" the stranger wondered, seeing the bills. "Yes," Michael nodded. "Oh, thank you, dear. God bless you for your generosity and kindness. I'm not asking for myself, you see." Michael wanted to move on, but he saw that it was important for the old woman to explain or justify herself, and so he didn't hurry. Let her talk. It wasn't hard for him to listen, and it would make her feel better. "I have a grandson, Stevie. His mother, my little daughter, died, so I'm raising him as best I can. We don't have enough money. I can't work anymore. I've become old and sick. So I have to ask for help from kind people at the station. Don't think I'm asking for money for drink. And I'm not lazy. I've worked my back off my whole life. I worked as a cleaner. If it weren't for my illness, I'd still be working now. I wouldn't need help. But I can't. For Stevie's sake, I walk around with an outstretched hand. He's growing. He needs to be fed well, clothed, educated." "Ah, you have a hard fate." Michael shook his head. "You're doing great not abandoning the boy. How old is he, Stevie?" The old woman smiled. She was clearly pleased to talk about her grandson. "He's 12, handsome and smart. He learns easily. He has a clear head. But he suffers because of our dire situation. He sees how hard it is for me and tries to earn some money. Sometimes he washes cars in the parking lot. Sometimes he mows lawns for people. He earns pennies, or sometimes nothing at all. People are different. They often cheat boys. And he spends a lot of time, comes home tired, then there's no time for lessons. So his studies are slipping. I tell him, 'Study, Stephen. Your main job now is studying. You don't need to work so much. I'll manage. And you need to study to get on your feet later.' But he doesn't listen to me. He doesn't listen." "He doesn't listen," Michael repeated. This story resonated with him somehow. He wanted to know more about the old woman and her grandson's life. "Is it hard for you with him?" "No, not at all," the beggar woman exclaimed, throwing up her hands. "You misunderstood. Stevie is a very good boy. He takes care of me, does everything around the house. He only doesn't listen to me about continuing to work. It's hard for him. My heart breaks for him. If only Stevie could be in a good family. He's talented. He could make something of himself, and I'm afraid he'll ruin all his abilities with me. That's what I worry about." With these words, the old woman adjusted her headscarf. When she raised her hand, the sleeve of her calico dress pulled up slightly, and Michael's eyes fell upon a bracelet, a thin gold chain with 3 heart-shaped pendants. The man stared, stunned, at the exquisite jewelry. No, it wasn't the fact that a beggar had something expensive that surprised him. It was just that many years ago he had ordered exactly the same bracelet from a jeweler for the girl he considered his soulmate, the one he dreamed of growing old with in a cozy little house by the sea, and she had become the biggest disappointment in his life. Their names were engraved on these heart pendants, Michael and Sarah, and the third heart was adorned with a diamond. Michael had spent all his savings on it then. What was this? Just a similar bracelet? Or that very one? It wasn't hard to find out, but it felt strange, almost scary. The old woman caught Michael's gaze and smiled. I know what you're thinking. She's pretending to be a beggar, but she's wearing gold. But you're mistaken. This is a memory. My daughter's memory. In the most difficult times, I couldn't part with this. My Sally loved this bracelet so much it meant a lot to her. That's why I haven't taken it off since that terrible day, Sarah. It was as if Michael had been doused with ice water. His heart clenched, beat faster, his temples pounded, spots blurred before his eyes. Sarah, the girl he wanted to spend his life with, for whom he had ordered the bracelet, was named Sarah. So, could it be? No, it simply couldn't be. Do you have time now? Michael asked. Yes, the old woman replied, looking suspiciously at the man who had first easily given her a large sum of money and was now acting so strangely. We need to talk, Michael said. I think I once knew your daughter, this bracelet, and her name. It all fits. Maybe we can sit down? All right. The old woman nodded and headed for an empty bench in front of the fountain. Michael shuffled after her. Michael met Sarah in the summer before his last year of university. He was doing mandatory work placement after renovations in a building, cleaning corridors together with a professional team. Sarah was in this team, a fragile, large-eyed girl. Michael noticed her immediately, cheerful, pure, bright. There was something captivating in her gaze, and he constantly tried to meet her eyes. When he succeeded, Sarah would blush, lower her lashes, and Michael would feel happy. His heart would sweetly skip a beat every time he was near her. It was surprising that no one else noticed her unique beauty. Not even Gary, the local Don Juan, who didn't miss a single attractive girl, paid Sarah any attention at all. Well, all the better. Michael didn't want Sarah to become one of his trophies, as Gary knew how to charm girls with a few words. Seeing Sarah dragging a heavy bucket of water, Michael dropped everything and was by her side. Let me take that. He took the heavy load from her fragile hands. Where do you need it? To the 2nd floor, the girl replied. They talked along the way. Sarah was simple and modest. It was easy and pleasant to talk to her. She, apparently, also liked the handsome, smiling guy. The students' work placement lasted a couple of hours, while the repair team worked a full day. On the day they met, Michael stayed with Sarah, helping her until the end of her shift. He didn't want to part with her even for a few hours. After work, they went to the cinema. Michael held her hand in his and understood that his life was taking a serious turn. He had never felt this way before. No other person had ever meant so much to him. Michael and Sarah started dating. Gradually, they became like family, getting to know each other more closely. Both grew up without fathers. Sarah never knew hers at all and didn't seem to be bothered by it. Both only had mothers. But while Michael's mother did everything for his education and prosperous life, Sarah's mother didn't have that opportunity. She worked as a cleaner, earning pennies. Sarah helped her from an early age. After 9th grade, she went to a construction technical school, not even thinking about higher education. I need to work. I need money. After finishing technical school, Sarah got a job with a repair team and started earning a salary. Their small family had more money, which was very welcome, as they had to rent an apartment. They didn't have their own place, and prices were rising. So they lived. They didn't starve, but the money was only enough for the bare necessities. Michael was sure they would get married. He saw no other fate for himself. Sarah was completely his person. Sensitive, kind, fragile. He wanted to protect and cherish her. She had a hard job, but he knew that after the wedding, she wouldn't have to carry buckets and breathe paint fumes. He would have a good profession, a high-paying job. He would fully provide for the family, and Sarah could take care of the house, the family, or study. Of course, Michael shared his thoughts with his mother. He was used to telling her everything. "Are you out of your mind?" She was horrified hearing his revelations. "How many times have I told you? You're a boy from a well-off family, a student at a prestigious university with prospects. We have a large apartment. Do you even realize that paupers like her are hunting for guys like you? How many women want to ride into a comfortable life on someone else's back?" "No, Mom. Sarah is completely different. You'll understand everything when you meet her." "You don't understand much. There'll be plenty more Sarahs instead of this one." "What wedding?" "You need a different girl, from a good family with a higher education. And these newcomers, they only want one thing. They'll have a child by a good guy, and then manipulating the child, they'll twist him around their little finger. And his relatives, too." However much Michael tried to explain to his mother that Sarah was different, she didn't want to listen. In the end, he decided, come what may. Even if his mother didn't agree, he would do it his way anyway. True, the wedding would have to be postponed. His mother would never agree to him bringing a wife into their shared apartment. She was set against Sarah. Living together wouldn't lead to anything good. There was only one way out. Get on his feet as quickly as possible, earn enough for a separate home, and then propose to his beloved. Without Sarah, Michael couldn't imagine his life anymore. Next to her, he felt strong and almost omnipotent, but at the same time very vulnerable, a strange feeling. His heart belonged to Sarah, she could do anything with him, but the girl treated him very gently, took care of him, tried to make him laugh, and when she rested her head on his shoulder, in those moments he felt like the happiest person in the world. The offer of an internship abroad came unexpectedly. Michael was finishing his thesis. Graduation was just around the corner. Soon he would have his diploma, he would be able to work and earn money. He planned to start saving for housing immediately. Even if it was a small apartment in an old house on the outskirts at first, the main thing was a place where he and Sarah could start their quiet, calm, measured, and very happy family life. One day, the rector called him in. It turned out that a foreign partner had offered a lucrative contract. They needed bright graduates and students. He would have to spend 3 years in a foreign country and work hard, but the salary offered was something a young specialist in the city wouldn't find. Michael immediately calculated this money would be enough for a very decent apartment. Besides, experience abroad would increase his value as a specialist, and upon his return, he would easily find a high-paying job. Of course, he gladly agreed. True, he would have to part with Sarah for a long 3 years. They wouldn't see each other, would barely be able to communicate, only correspond. 3 years. A monstrous period. But on the other hand, it was the only chance to quickly get on his feet. He had to endure, survive the separation. This would be a real test of their feelings, and Michael was sure they would both pass it with dignity. Sarah was upset when she learned about her beloved's plans, even cried a little, but understood that it was the only way out of their difficult situation. Before leaving, Michael wanted to give her a special gift, something memorable, so she would look at it and remember him. That's when he went to the jewelry workshop. He decided to order an exclusive piece of jewelry, something no one else had. Together with the craftsman, they chose a bracelet. Elegant, fragile, like Sarah herself, with original heart-shaped pendants, with engraving. On 2 hearts, he asked for their names to be engraved, and the craftsman adorned the third with a diamond. The craftsman named the sum for materials and work. It was all of Michael's savings, but he parted with them without regret. The bracelet was ready in a week. Seeing it, Michael sincerely admired it. Yes, it was exactly what he wanted. Not just a trinket, but a piece of jewelry with meaning. Sarah's eyes lit up with joy at the sight of the gift. True, she immediately became embarrassed. It must be incredibly expensive. A gold piece and custom-made, too. You deserve the very best, Michael smiled, and you'll have all of it when I return. Let the bracelet remind you of me and bring you joy in my absence. I won't take it off at all, Sarah promised and hugged her beloved. His mother, unlike Sarah, greeted the news of her son's internship with joy. What a smart boy you are, she smiled proudly. After all, they offered it to you, not just anyone. They value you, and the trip will be good for you. You'll get that pauper fiancé out of your head, and your mind will be clear. Michael didn't argue then. He wouldn't forget Sarah abroad for a minute. Moreover, this whole internship was only for her sake. Without the trip, they wouldn't get their own home so quickly. And this way, he would soon be independent, ready for a family. He had to work hard for happiness. And Michael worked his fingers to the bone. It was hard. Complex financial reports, a language barrier. He had to learn everything anew, but he managed. He had a goal, and he was moving towards it confidently. He called his mother often from the office or hotel. She was happy about the calls, showered him with compliments and questions. But with Sarah, he had to correspond. She didn't have a home phone, and he couldn't call her. He missed her voice so much, he started longing for her almost immediately after leaving. The correspondence was also short-lived. After a couple of months, letters from the girl stopped coming. He himself wrote almost every week, but did she receive his messages? Probably not, otherwise she would have surely replied. "Mom, do you know what happened?" he wondered in conversation with her. "Why isn't Sarah answering my letters?" "How should I know?" his mother replied reluctantly. "Maybe your flighty girl's been messing around. That's how they are." "You're not telling me something. I'll drop everything and fly back tomorrow. I need to make sure she's okay." "Don't even think about it," his mother exclaimed, frightened. "Everything is fine with her. She's waiting for you. It's just trouble with international mail, temporary problems. That's why letters aren't getting through either way. Don't worry. Just work calmly." It was hard living those years without contact with his beloved. His mother spoke about Sarah reluctantly, changing the subject. When her son insisted, she would say that everything was fine. Sarah was alive and well, working. Michael often asked his mother to arrange a call. He wanted to hear her voice, but his parent was adamant. "There will be no Sarahs in my house," she replied. Michael was angry, but he understood that it was her apartment, and she wasn't obligated to let in someone she couldn't stand. Michael had no doubt when he returned and married Sarah, his mother would have to meet her. And then his mother would understand what a wonderful person Sarah was. She would accept her, she would definitely change her mind. That's how it would be. The sooner the better. The 3 years of the internship flew by quickly, on the one hand. Michael had a lot of work, interesting tasks. It was engaging and brought in money. On the other hand, 3 years without his beloved felt like an eternity. He missed her voice, her eyes, her scent, her touch. He dreamed of her, saw her in girls he met. He hadn't looked at anyone else during that time, although there were options. Many young female employees were not averse to starting a relationship with a hardworking guy, but Michael only thought about Sarah. He didn't need anyone else. His mother, by the way, hoped her son would find a decent girl there, often asked. He disappointed her every time. Why would he need anyone else? Sarah, that was his destiny. The internship period was coming to an end. Michael had enough funds in his account for a very good apartment in Granville, and even enough left over for a car. In the last week before leaving, he wandered through supermarkets, choosing gifts for Sarah, a beautiful dress, jewelry, even toys. It was pleasant to guess what would make her happy. His mother met him at the airport. In 3 years, she had changed a lot. She had gained weight, had more wrinkles and more gray hair. Michael was happy to see his loved one. They hugged tightly and went home. "You've grown up." His mother didn't take her eyes off him. "You've become a real man, handsome, tall." Michael smiled. Youth was behind him. He had become an adult, ready to start a family. They didn't mention Sarah anymore. What was the point? Any mention of her always infuriated his mother. He hurried home. Quickly leave his things, take a shower, and run to her, to Sarah. Surely she wasn't home. The day was in full swing. She was at work. Then he would find out from her mother where to look for her. He couldn't wait until the end of the workday. He had dreamed of this meeting for 3 years. He couldn't bear a few more hours. He needed to see her, hear her voice, look into her eyes. "Going to see her, are you?" his mother asked when he was at the front door. He didn't deny it. To her. "Well, good luck," his parent said with a contemptuous twist of her lips. Michael had never been to Sarah's home, but he knew the address well. He had walked her to her building many times. She lived on Mill Street in a former barracks, a dilapidated 2-story wooden building. The disadvantaged neighborhood had become even more neglected over these 3 years. Piles of garbage, dusty paths, overgrown weeds. Michael climbed the creaky stairs to the 2nd floor. Here was the right door. He pressed the doorbell, but realizing it didn't work, he knocked decisively. The door opened after about 2 minutes. An elderly man stood on the threshold in a greasy robe, with a sharp gaze and patchy gray hair. Who was this? Sarah said she lived with her mother. What old man was this? Good afternoon, Michael greeted politely. I'd like to speak with the owners of the apartment. He's right here in person. The man smiled proudly. What did you want to talk about? I'm not inviting you in. My grandchildren are sleeping. Of course, Michael hastily agreed. An elderly man? Grandchildren? Maybe he had the wrong door? Well, what is it about? The man waited, starting to lose patience. You see, I'm looking for my girlfriend, Sarah. I must have the wrong apartment, but she definitely lives somewhere nearby. Can you tell me? Your neighbors, apparently, Sarah. The man shook his head. Sarah and Sue, her mother? Yes, people like that lived here. But they left somewhere in a hurry. This is my apartment. They were renting it. I don't know why so suddenly, as if they were running from someone. Well, it worked out for me. My son had twins, so they moved here. The apartment is more spacious. They left. And you don't know where or why? No, they didn't report to me. And I didn't ask. I'm not used to prying. They packed their things in an evening, paid up, and that was it. From what they said, I understood they were going to another city. Which one, I don't know. Michael then understood that he had lost Sarah. Forever. But he didn't give up immediately. He started an investigation. He went to Sarah's former workplace, found her friends, talked to them. They knew nothing about her plans. She hadn't talked to them about it. Sarah became strange then, long before she left, shared Clary, a colleague. At first she was sad after you left. Then suddenly she became happy. She was glowing from within. We thought she had fallen in love again. She denied it. But something was happening with her. Then something else happened again. She walked around pale, scared, lost. I tried to find out what was wrong. If I could help, I felt sorry for her, but you couldn't get a word out of her. And then the sudden departure? Nothing is clear. Having found out nothing, Michael went to the police with a missing person report. They laughed at him there. They explained that Sarah and her mother were adults, could move freely without informing anyone. Maybe she ran away from you? The young man in uniform smirked. Doesn't want to communicate, and you don't understand. She left. It happens. You're not a relative of hers. I can't take a report. There are no grounds. After a while, Michael lost hope. He understood that he would never find Sarah. They didn't have their own place. They could have gone to any city. Looking for them was like looking for a needle in a haystack. But why? Why did Sarah do that? Did she fall out of love and run away? Or did something happen? What difference did it make now? It was clear they would never see each other again. And that's when the young man fell into despair. While he was running around, searching, hoping, it seemed everything could be fixed. But now Michael knew. Sarah had disappeared forever. Plans for a wedding, children, a long life were not meant to be. What was the internship for? What was he saving money for? Why did he leave? He suddenly realized he didn't want to live. Meaning? Sarah was gone and wouldn't be back. He thought about the reasons for her disappearance from morning till night. He lay in his room, door closed, listening to sad music. Maybe Clary was right. Met someone else. Or couldn't wait, left to find a new life. In any case, she easily erased him, didn't even leave a note. She could have sent a message through Clary or through her mother. Did that mean Michael meant nothing to her? Sarah was the world to him, the meaning of life, and he was just an acquaintance to her, someone pleasant to spend time with. He didn't want to live. He barely ate, didn't answer calls, didn't talk to his worried mother. "Why are you suffering?" she asked. The girl didn't wait. It happens. She has her own life. You have yours. It's a normal situation, and you're making a tragedy out of it. She probably wanted to ease his condition, but her lamentations made it harder. Mom. She didn't understand anything. She couldn't see into his heart. And there was so much pain, despair, hopelessness that he couldn't imagine how to live on. In the end, his mother found him a psychotherapist. After 2 days of refusing to eat. She couldn't force him to eat and was truly scared that her son would die. A short, elderly man in a black t-shirt and jeans, around 50, with gray hair and glasses, came to their home. His mother had called him to the house, knowing her son wouldn't go to a clinic. Michael didn't know what trouble and money it had cost. This man? He just sat nearby and spoke in a low voice. Michael didn't listen at first, then he became interested. The psychotherapist somehow helped. Apparently he was a professional. After several sessions, Michael felt different. He understood that life went on even without Sarah, that there was much that was interesting and important. It was selfish and foolish to spend time in sorrow, lying in bed. The girl's disappearance was her choice and right. No one is another's property. If she wanted to, she left. She knew where to find him. If she had wanted to, Sarah would have shown up. It couldn't be said that he became happy. The longing for his beloved was strong. But he found strength. He understood it was time to act. Look for a job, get settled. The psychotherapist advised him to continue the course, but Michael refused. He felt he had received enough help. Now he would manage on his own. Getting a job wasn't difficult. With such experience, he was hired as a senior economist at a local household appliance trading company. The salary was decent, and they promised career growth. And Michael planned to prove himself. He needed to distract himself from sad thoughts. If he stopped, the longing would swallow him whole. He felt it. Michael worked hard and quickly achieved success. Life gradually changed from black and white to color. First dull gray, then bright, full. When you have money, the world is attractive. He could afford a lot: travel, expensive resorts, beautiful cars, and women, of course. A young, attractive, wealthy man had no shortage of options. His mother was happy at first. She was afraid for his life. The sight of her unresponsive son scared her. But after years, Michael's overly free lifestyle began to bother her. "You need to get married, son." He heard this phrase more and more often, but he couldn't agree. He was fine as he was. He felt free and almost happy. Serious relationships, he had been through that and didn't want to repeat. If you love, you get so attached that you can't breathe. You become fragile, vulnerable. He remembered the pain of Sarah's disappearance. No, enough. Love, serious relationships. For him, it was the end of freedom. A person in love doesn't belong to themselves. The object of their feelings can do whatever they want. Therefore, Michael, at his age, didn't even think about getting married. There was plenty of time. He wasn't 40 yet. He would manage if he wanted to. His mother scared him with lonely old age, with no one to give him a glass of water. It didn't convince him. He joked that he wasn't sure he would want to drink at such a moment. It was foolish to give up his happy bachelor life for a vague prospect, especially since he had enough female company. He tried not to remember Sarah, but she surfaced in his thoughts, in dreams, in girls he met. He had learned to cope with emotions. He hadn't erased her from his heart, but now Sarah didn't prevent him from living. He had managed to leave her in the past. At least, so he thought. All these memories flashed through Michael's mind as he walked with the old woman to the bench. He saw the bracelet, and all his feigned nonchalance vanished. He felt the longing for Sarah again, realized he would give up all his wealth and freedom just to have her by his side. Only the old woman said that Sarah was no longer alive. He was afraid to think about it, hoping he had misunderstood or there was a mistake. "So you say you knew my Sally?" The old woman watched him closely. "Yes," he nodded. "This bracelet, I recognized it. Can I see it?" The old woman silently took off the jewelry and held it out. She didn't take her eyes off him. The man's breath caught. It was it. The very one. There was no doubt. An exquisite piece. He looked at the hearts. Yes, that was it. Names on 2, a diamond on the 3rd. "I am that Michael," he said, handing back the bracelet. "I gave it to your daughter many years ago." "So this is who you are," the old woman shook her head. "Sarah was so in love with you then. Nothing like that had ever happened to her. She was walking on air. I told her not to get involved with people like that." "Like what?" Michael didn't understand. Sons of rich parents. Rich. We weren't rich then. My mother raised me alone, just like you raised Sarah. But still, you weren't our match. You studied at university, your mother earned well, and considered everyone poorer than you not a match for her son. Maybe she was right, I don't know. There was just one problem. She went against your love with Sally." "I don't understand anything." Michael wanted the old woman's face, Sarah's mother's face, to soften. She was clearly offended. Why? For their happiness, he had gone abroad for an internship, worked hard for 3 years, earned enough for an apartment, wanted to propose, but couldn't find her, didn't even find a trace. It was Sarah who disappeared, ran away from him. "You don't understand?" The old woman's eyes seemed to see right through him, an examining gaze. Well, maybe you forgot? Or never knew? Michael shrugged. I looked for her, he said. When I came back, I looked for Sarah everywhere. I went to your home, there were other people there. I tried to find out, at her work. I wanted to file a missing person report. They refused. No one could tell me where Sarah had disappeared to. No one. Did you talk to your mother? The old woman clarified. Yes, she didn't know either. Michael understood from the woman's words and face that his mother was involved. Nothing could be changed, but anxiety rose in his heart. He was worried his heart was about to jump out. Would he finally learn the truth now? The truth he had searched for so long? The old woman fiddled with the bracelet, looking into the distance. Her gaze clouded over, she was transported to the past. Michael wanted to snap her out of her stupor to learn the truth sooner. All these years he had lived, sure that he had left the situation in the past. He entertained himself, enjoyed life, worked. A chance meeting changed everything, brought hidden feelings to the surface. He felt lost, vulnerable again, physically pained by the impossibility of taking Sarah's hand. It was important to hear what had happened after he left. But the old woman sat, lips pressed together, looking into the distance. Michael didn't dare disturb her. The elderly woman had been through something terrible. He had to give her time. My Sally? She loved deeply. You were the most important thing to her, the old woman finally began. I noticed right away that something was off with her. She was staying out too late. She came home happy, she was glowing. I immediately understood it was about a guy. I didn't pry. I knew she would tell me. I asked her to be careful. I thought someone from the team was courting her. And then, look how it turned out. Susan raised her daughter alone. From the village, but she didn't want to live there. She made an effort to break into the city. It didn't turn out as she dreamed, but better than in the village. After school, she planned to go to technical school. It didn't work out. It turned out it wasn't easy to become a student without connections and money. She didn't pass the competition, but she wasn't upset. She would stay in the city. She had money for the first time. Her parents had given her everything. She rented a room in a dormitory. She got a job as a cleaner in a small shop. She knew how to handle a mop since childhood. It was familiar work. She had her own income, decent compared to village wages. The next year, she tried to enroll again, another failure. She cried, despaired, decided it wasn't meant to be. Let things go as they would. She had a job, a rented place. She would manage. Years passed. Sue grew up from an awkward teenager into a pretty young woman. Men started looking at her. She started thinking about a family. She wanted to take care of children and a husband, make a cozy home, cook delicious food. You wouldn't try for yourself, cook cabbage soup, bake pies. It was different for a husband and children. You would want to please them. Then a suitable candidate appeared, Lenny Smith, a loader. Nice-looking, cheerful. Not an oligarch, but Sue wasn't a princess either. She understood she wasn't going to get a professor's son. But with Lenny, you wouldn't be lost. You wouldn't be bored. Also from the village, they had a lot in common. Practical, reliable, like a rock with him. Lenny didn't wait long, he proposed. A symbolic wedding without a motorcade, guests, or a toastmaster. They had no money. Sue had a white dress, a light sundress. They sat with friends and the bride's parents in a restaurant, celebrated in a small circle. Lenny had been an orphan since he was 12, raised by his aunt. He hadn't received much love. They raised him until he was of age and pushed him out. He managed as best he could. Susan dreamed that now a happy life would begin. It would be easier to make their way together. They could. They rented a separate one-room apartment. They could afford it on 2 salaries. Leonard made plans. He was going to buy a home. Sue looked at her husband with hope and pride. If Lenny said there would be an apartment, then it would happen. He didn't talk idly. Only their plans were not meant to be. Leonard tried to earn wherever he could. Construction sites, unloading wagons. He didn't get enough sleep, didn't eat enough. His wife felt sorry for him, begged him to give up the extra work. He smiled. We'll earn enough for an apartment, then I'll lie on the sofa. Sue felt sorry for her husband, saw he was tired, had lost weight. His face was gray with circles under his eyes. Her heart sensed it wouldn't end well. And so it happened. Trouble came at night when Sue was sleeping. Her husband went for some extra work. He was supposed to return in the morning, but he didn't come. Sue got worried, went to the station. She knew he was unloading a train. They told her there. He finished the work. They paid him. He was going home, but he walked along the tracks and didn't hear the train. The train driver saw him too late in the dark. It's unclear why he was sitting there. Didn't he see the train? A worker wondered. Susan understood everything. He was very tired, exhausted. He probably fell asleep right on the tracks, didn't make it home, sat down to rest and passed out. Thus Susan became a young widow. She took the loss hard. With him, her hopes for a family, an apartment, old age with her beloved disappeared. And during this difficult period, she suddenly realized she was expecting a child. The news made her happy and upset. Happy because Leonard hadn't disappeared without a trace. He would live on in the child. Upset. How could she manage alone? Her salary was barely enough for her, and now a baby. What a situation. After crying from joy, anxiety, and emotions, she pulled herself together. She would manage. She wasn't completely alone. Her parents in the village would help. But her husband's death wasn't the only blow. Her parents. A tragedy with them. A short circuit in their old house, it flared up like a match. They couldn't get out. Both died. Susan couldn't believe this was happening. First her husband, now her parents. No home, no loved ones nearby. Completely alone in an uncomfortable, hostile world. She didn't want to drink or eat. She went to work automatically. She ate, talked. But it felt like what was happening was a terrible dream. People were actors, houses were cardboard sets. She saw herself from the outside. There were no tears, only a heaviness. Sometimes panic, it was hard to breathe. She gasped for air, spots before her eyes. Then it passed, and apathy returned. She lived like this for 2 months. The feeling of loneliness and uselessness became familiar. Before, her parents and husband loved her. She doted on her loved ones. And now, what was the point of living? Unpleasant thoughts began to visit her. Should she end this meaningless existence? It wasn't difficult. Why stay? What for? For whom? At this difficult moment, she felt the child's first movements, cautious kicks. She had almost forgotten about her condition. So much had piled up. But she wasn't alone. Soon a baby would be born, Leonard's child. Maybe it would look like him. She hoped so much. From then on, she pulled herself together. She clearly realized she would soon be a mother. She had to hold on for the baby, a child. Not guilty of anything, fragile, vulnerable. They needed someone to lean on. She would be that person. As if waking from a terrible dream, she set about her tasks. Little time before childbirth, many questions. Get the insurance payout for the burnt house. It would be enough for maternity leave if she economized. Get the documents processed at the clinic. Start putting together a layette, stroller, crib, diapers. All these tasks distracted her from heavy thoughts. She began to feel happy again. She eagerly awaited the baby, wanted to see its face, see her husband's features, her parents. To feel that she wasn't alone anymore. In her desire to save money, she worked until late in her pregnancy. She washed floors, did the only thing she knew how to do. She hauled heavy buckets, bent down. Labor started early. She hadn't expected it. Nothing had indicated it would. An ambulance was called right to her work. From there, she went to the maternity hospital. Several hours of agony, and they placed a treasure on her chest, a tiny girl. She looked strange, wrinkled, purple. They immediately took her to the premature baby ward. Sue didn't know what was wrong with her. The doctor said nothing, brushed her off. Anything can happen. Didn't carry to term, a nurse answered irritably. They don't take care of themselves, then they suffer. What Sue went through until the baby's condition stabilized. She had never been so scared. She prayed, just let the girl survive. Health problems? Nothing, they would manage. The main thing was that she lived. She couldn't bear another loss. And Sally survived. They were discharged with a healthy child without diagnoses. Her low weight was the only reminder of prematurity. Sue thought she would fatten her up, but she remained fragile, almost transparent. It looked beautiful, touching. Sarah, as Sue hoped, looked like her father, with bright eyes, smiling, charming. At times, Lenny's features were so apparent it seemed like her husband himself was looking at her. It made her heart feel warmer. It was hard being alone with a nursing infant. Until Sally was 2.5 and went to nursery school, Sue couldn't work. There was just enough money for the essentials: rent, food, minimal clothing. Sometimes Sally got sick and they spent money on medicine. Their savings dwindled. The benefits were minimal. And yet the young mother felt happy. She had a daughter, a wonderful girl, smart, beautiful, her pride, her joy. She felt needed and loved again. They say other people's children grow up quickly. Sue was convinced her own did too. Time flew by dizzyingly. Sarah was already in kindergarten, transformed from a tiny baby into a princess with pigtails. Scene change, a first grader. Sue remembered crying at the assembly line, sending her daughter to school. She felt sorry for the child. Now much was required of her. Sitting through lessons, doing homework. What if the teachers were mean? Sue had some like that. Sally, however, glowed with happiness. She couldn't wait to grow up, become an adult, help her mother. The girl saw how hard it was for Sue, how her back and legs ached. A few more years flew by like a fog, and now Sarah was a high schooler. Her studies weren't great. She tried, Sue saw, but it didn't work out. The woman wasn't upset, didn't shame her daughter. Neither Sue nor Leonard excelled academically. Why be surprised? That wasn't the main thing. Sarah grew up kind, sensitive, attentive, wise. She knew how to economize around the house, how to cook a delicious dinner on a minimal budget. This was more important than solving equations. And what a beauty Sally turned out to be. Slender, large-eyed, fair-skinned. Guys turned their heads. Sarah herself didn't notice, but Sue saw and was proud. If only she could get a good husband. That means a lot for a woman. Sarah finished construction technical school, got a job, a team of other young girls. Nothing complicated was required, just cleaning sites. Sue was happy. The work didn't require qualifications, the pay wasn't high, but Sarah was employed and the work wasn't that hard. And then Sarah fell in love. Susan understood immediately from her eyes, from her mysterious smile. Later, Sarah confessed. There was a guy, wonderful, Michael. The relationship was serious. When Sarah described her chosen one, Sue paused. It was out of her league. A student from a prestigious university, son of a wealthy mother. Sarah wouldn't fit in. Sally was beautiful, hard-working, but their levels were too different. But Sarah insisted that everything would be fine. The guy was genuinely in love, talking about marriage. True, first he wanted a home, and for that he would spend several years abroad. Even then, Sue suspected, she didn't like it. It seemed Michael was messing with her head, would play around and leave her, go off to have fun, forget Sarah, and she would wait and suffer. Naive, she believed everything. And then Michael left. That's when it turned out Sarah was expecting a child. What an unexpected turn. Susan insisted on termination, didn't believe Michael would acknowledge the child. 2 women couldn't manage, they barely made ends meet. Most likely the guy had forgotten about Sarah, and she naively thought he would be happy. Foolish child. Susan shook her head. I told her to give up her fantasies. Michael hung on every word. But my daughter stood her ground, said you would be happy to know. True, the girl didn't know how to tell you. Your phone was unreachable, you didn't answer letters. That convinced me even more that you had simply run away from Sarah and cut ties. I didn't know who was involved. I figured it out later. Everything finally fell into place only now, after talking to you. I wrote to Sarah too. I wrote often. Michael choked out. There were problems with communication here, but I wrote every evening, and it was her who didn't answer. No wonder, Sue smirked. Your mother, she apparently intercepted your letters, didn't let you communicate. She really didn't like the prospective daughter-in-law, the simple girl. How do you know? Michael breathed out. I figured it out. It's a pity it wasn't sooner. Just wait. You'll understand yourself. Listen. Not receiving an answer, Sarah decided to talk to his mother. Of course your mother wasn't thrilled about the meeting. Upon learning of the pregnancy, she flew into a rage. She shouted, accused her of trying to deceive her, to get money out of her. Then she threatened to take the child, as he would be left to a mother without a penny or a roof over her head. They would give him to the well-off father and deprive Sarah of her rights. She said many hurtful things. Sarah stood there half dead with fear. Sarah was seriously scared for the child then. She already loved him, was afraid of losing him. And what if Michael's mother carried out her threats? Took the baby? Then Sarah understood. She had to leave, far away from that terrible woman, capable of anything. And Michael? He, it seemed, wouldn't support her anymore. According to your mother, you had forgotten all about Sarah, Susan continued. She said you had a girlfriend there, that you weren't asking about Sarah, only sharing details of your new life. It seemed plausible, and I believed it based on her words. Sarah returned after the conversation in tears, sobbing, begging to move, wanting to hide. She regretted what she had done. It was useless going to Michael's mother. Nothing good came of it, only trouble. Well, we moved, Susan sighed. We settled here in Riverton. Why not? Nothing held us in Granville, no home, no work. In that sense, my daughter and I were free. Sarah wanted to hide. She was afraid your mother would carry out her threats. I didn't believe it, but for my daughter's peace of mind, I agreed. And here we are. Mother and daughter quickly settled in. The town was smaller than Granville. Life was simpler. Prices were lower, the atmosphere calmer. In due time, Stephen was born. Healthy, strong. Grandmother and mother doted on the little one. It seemed Stevie understood from infancy how difficult things were for them and was ideal. He slept a lot, ate well, didn't fuss. Everything would have been fine, but money was tight. Susan and Sarah worked as cleaners, earning pennies that were barely enough for the essentials. Rent, food, minimal clothing. Stephen didn't have expensive toys, gadgets, or fashionable clothes, but he didn't complain, didn't demand. On the contrary, he promised that when he grew up, he would buy them everything. Well, we didn't live richly, but happily and peacefully, Susan continued with tears. And then, tragedy, with my Sally, like a bolt from the blue. She fell ill, didn't go to the doctor, kept working, went around with a fever, washed floors in cold water. She hid it until the last moment. I wouldn't have let her, even though we needed the money. I noticed when she was completely bedridden. I called an ambulance to the hospital. Immediately, bilateral pneumonia, advanced. They couldn't save her, and so Stephen and I were left alone. Susan had suffered many losses, but Sarah's hit the hardest. If it weren't for Stephen, she wouldn't have survived, but she had to be strong for her grandson. She pulled herself together, she worked again, cleaned, cooked. She supported her grandson. It wasn't easy for him either. 8 years old without a mother. The old woman's speech flowed smoothly. Michael was overwhelmed with feelings. His heart ached from the fact that Sarah was lost forever. He had gotten used to living without her, but he knew she was somewhere. And now? So that was it. But then, it seemed he had found a son. Stephen, by all accounts, was his child. His and Sarah's continuation. Why then, even in the most difficult times, didn't Sarah turn to me for help? Michael choked out. She knew where to find me. I wasn't hiding. We were afraid, Susan sighed. Your mother, she made it clear that if we made a claim, she would sue for the child. How were we supposed to know that you wouldn't side with her? That's why we hid. How could she think that I... Michael didn't finish. Tears were welling up, but he didn't want to cry in front of Sarah's mother. Don't judge. Susan gently stroked his shoulder. We were afraid for Stevie, you understand? Fear is a bad advisor. Sarah was offended at first that you had found someone else there. Then she often looked at your photos on social media, where you were with different girls. But I didn't have anyone there. On the internship? Michael exclaimed. I worked like Papa Carlo, to earn enough for an apartment to live happily with Sarah. That's fate for you, Susan shook her head. Fate is quite a schemer, and now? What's the probability of us meeting here? 0. And yet, here we are, talking. I want to see my son, Michael suddenly said. Stevie, yours. He is mine, isn't he? Yours, Susan smiled. You'll see the boy, all doubts will disappear. Grandma, hi, where are you from? A slightly hoarse voice was heard. Michael turned sharply, saw a tall, thin teenager. It was like lightning struck. The spitting image of Michael from childhood photos, only dressed and haircut differently. The teenager looked at him with distrust. And here comes little Stevie. Susan smiled. Finished work? Yes, that's why I came. They paid well. Let's go home. No need to stand here anymore. Stephen apparently didn't yet understand that Michael wasn't a casual passerby. Hold on. Susan hesitated. I want to introduce you to a good person. This is Michael. Uncle Mike. I'm your father, Michael stated directly. The words slipped out. He didn't like Uncle Mike. You. The boy's eyes widened, his eyebrows shot up. The confession was shocking, but a flicker of joy and relief appeared in the depths of his eyes. Several years passed. Susan and Stephen lived in Granville again. Michael bought them an apartment next to his. More correctly, all three lived together, as one family. Michael was still not speaking to his mother. After meeting Susan and Stephen, he returned to Granville and went to his mother. A long, difficult conversation took place. His mother hadn't expected such a turn. Who could have thought? She didn't know what had happened to Sarah, didn't care if a child had been born. All these years she believed she had done the right thing, saved her son from a greedy girl, prevented her from ruining his life. At first she denied it, didn't want to admit she had acted disgustingly, didn't talk about the intercepted letters. That old woman blabbed to you to foist her grandson off, and you believed her. The probability that he's yours is minimal. Michael could have argued. Stevie was his, there was no doubt. There was an official document confirming the relationship. He had ordered a DNA test almost immediately. Not because he doubted. Stevie was too much like him as a child. The test was needed for adoption, and Michael intended to take Stevie under his wing. The boy had lived in unsuitable conditions for so many years. That would come to an end. Michael begged his mother for a long time to tell the truth. She evaded, avoided answering. From her behavior, he figured it out himself. Then she burst out. She called Sarah and Susan names, described her son's terrible future if he had tied his fate to a pauper. Michael looked at his mother, pressing his lips together, his closest, dearest person. She had dedicated her whole life to him, done so much, helped him make something of himself. And it was his mother who had destroyed his happiness with her own hands. Michael tried not to think about what would have happened if, upon returning, he had found Sarah in Granville. Stephen would have been about 2 years old. They would have gotten married, bought an apartment, lived happily. In a couple of years, Stephen would have had a brother or sister. Sarah would have still been alive. Michael didn't speak to his mother for about 2 years. He wasn't the one who initiated the silence. His mother was offended herself. She was outraged that her son didn't appreciate her contribution. She tried to forbid him, an adult, from communicating with Stephen and Susan. Upon learning that he was going to formalize paternity, she flew into a rage. What are you doing? Are you crazy? To saddle yourself with your mistress's son and the grandmother too. How do you know whose he is? Who knows what genes he has? You'd be better off marrying a decent woman with a child if you want a family. She said many unpleasant things about Stephen and Susan. Michael tried to calm her down, explain. It was useless. The elderly woman reacted to the mention of her grandson like a bull to a red flag. She lost her temper, spewing insults. Michael felt sorry for his mother, but he wasn't going to abandon his child to indulge her whims, especially since he and his son immediately bonded. His mother was offended and stopped communicating. He periodically tried to reconnect. He knew that sooner or later his parent, despite her stubbornness, would melt. For now, he had plenty to do. He needed to catch up with Stephen. Son and father often went on vacation, to the sea, to the mountains. The teenager sincerely admired the world, eagerly absorbing impressions. They talked a lot. Stephen turned out to be interesting, wise beyond his years. Now that the boy didn't have to work, his studies improved. At the prestigious gymnasium, he quickly became one of the best. Susan was always there. How else could it be? She had raised Stephen for so many years. They had become the closest people. They couldn't be separated. Michael's personal life also improved. He finally met a woman, interesting, kindred in spirit. She didn't resemble the flighty beauties. Helen worked as an accountant, raising a son, Stephen's age, alone. The boys quickly hit it off. Great. Now those were guys. Michael smiled, watching the teenagers discuss something or fix a bicycle. It seemed they would become a strong, friendly family. Helen immediately became friends with Stephen and Susan. Peace, harmony, calm, mutual support. Michael felt warm and at ease. And his mother? His mother would understand everything in time. She herself was already regretting her stubbornness, he noticed. Sooner or later, she would thaw. That time wasn't far off. No one held a grudge against her. Only mothers, perhaps, found that hard to understand. Never mind, everything would work out.